when I first experienced Marriott brands. So it's been a wonderful experience. I'm a brand supporter over the last 2 decades. Really a lot has changed, but I'm still very loyal to the brand and I love the app. I'm planning my first business trip post-pandemic. I'm super excited about it. And I just want to let you know, I hopped on the Bonvoy app and saw some changes. It's really fantastic.
I love to hear that. Thank you for sharing that, and thanks for the loyalty. And yeah, we were just talking about how enthusiastic we are that people are starting to travel again and feel excited about their future trips and everything too.
Awesome. So let's start by you telling us a little bit about your history with Marriott. I know you've been there for 7.5 years, and I'd love to hear what gets you excited about still working there.
Sure, happy to. So as you said, I've been with the company, I've been with Marriott International, which is our corporate headquarters, for about 7.5 years now in different roles and capacities. So I started off on a team really focused on consumer insights, and then it evolved into customer experience. I then had a stint in global brand management where I was in charge of the JW Marriott global brand team. So amazing experience helping to open several of our hotels, doing workshops with teams all around the world as we were thinking about our branding, our strategy, positioning. And then most recently, in the past little less than a year, I've been on this new team. It's called Global Enterprise Insights and Strategy. And what our team really does is look at like macroeconomic trends. So we focus on what are the things that are most important to our guests? Where do we see some of the white spaces and opportunity areas? How are these driving different guest satisfaction experiences? Like really just looking very holistically, as well as helping with like just again, that consumer insights piece, thinking about how we activate and make sure that we're helping from a strategic planning perspective, supporting our leaders as we're thinking short, long-term, where do we head next as well.
Awesome, thank you. Marriott, I read, has been an entity or a brand since 1927, and I understand you guys started out as a very interesting 9-stool root beer stand. A lot has changed during that time. I'd be interested to know what your strategy was coming into the pandemic and how that's changed with the pandemic over the last year.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, I mean, it's kind of funny because Marriott has an interesting story. I mean, I think a lot of times people think of us obviously for our hotels and resorts and locations all around the world, but we are a hospitality company. We started, as you said, like as this 9-seat root beer stand, like a couple miles away in Washington, D.C. here. And, I think some of the core values have always been there in terms of what we were thinking both before the pandemic and certainly even more so now. But a lot of it has to do with this idea of putting people first. So putting our associates out there and taking care of them so that they take care of our guests and the guests come back. And that's really the fundamental business model that drives every decision that we make. But I would say the things that are most important are just the core values related to embracing change. I think certainly this past year, we've had to be very flexible. We've had to adapt and adjust on a lot of levels, both from the guest experience side, as well as like where we put our resources, how we try to drive additional revenue, how do we get that guest loyalty experience, everything. I mean, all different aspects of the customer journey are touched on. And I think the big thing is, from a company standpoint, another big core value is this idea that we have the spirit to serve, that we continue to embody that we welcome everybody and anybody. We want people to feel like we are their home away from home. And that when they come to our different properties, I mean, we have 30 brands. I think that's what's so amazing is we have everything from the Ritz-Carlton to extended stay options like Residence Inn, or some of our select brands like Element or Aloft. There's just the whole gamut of spectrum of experiences. So just encouraging people that when they come, they just feel, again, welcomed, and that they really want to be loyal to us, and that they'll feel that sense of like, I want to go back either personally or professionally, like for that next leisure trip, business trip, meeting, whatever I have to be there for too.
That's awesome. Well, I definitely have stayed at many of the brands and I feel always welcome.
Love it.
I did see that you're launching this really exciting campaign as we come back to travel. And I saw you guys are engaged in some new channels like TikTok, which I think is unusual, but it was very good. And I took a look at the new plug and it's awesome. Can you please tell the audience about what it means for the new campaign and how it's going to impact all of your 30 brands?
Sure. And so, as you said, we launched this new campaign just a couple of weeks ago. It's all about the power of travel. And the idea is that, especially after this past year and a half or so, we know the restorative power of travel that it brings, that it connects people. It's really in the spirit of growth and healing and unity, that travel is something that people, I think, if anything, I can speak for myself. Like, I know I certainly won't take it as much for granted. I feel like it's not necessarily a given, it's a privilege. And it's just something that, again, was so important to me on multiple levels before, but I had this newfound appreciation for it. And I think it really leans into this idea that you can expand your mind, your horizons, like your corners of the world are not just for you, they're for other people to discover too. And so, in terms of the platforms and the channels, like you said, TikTok, this was the first time we had ever used that as a medium. So there were some really exciting placements when the campaign first launched, where we partnered with influencers. We had some original content developed. We also are doing some partnerships and activations with like Hulu in terms of in-ad placements. I know they're doing QR codes with Disney Plus, like just all sorts of different channels and visibilities and exposures, because I mean, we all know we're experiencing so many different messages simultaneously, and trying to cut through that noise. We did a lot of like just validation and research. Like we know, again, like we've all been talking about, that travel is just such a wonderful experience that really does unite people, but it has this power. So this power of travel campaign, I think, leans into that idea, and these new channels are just a great way to continue to get that message out there and articulate that value proposition.
I love how the campaigns are so differentiated, and they're very exploratory. I mean, I was wondering how you guys chose the locations and the different influencers. How do you guys select those?
So it was a combination of a lot of thoughts of like, I mean, we are obviously a global world, right? Like we need to be representing like different perspectives, backgrounds, experiences. And so I think some of the locations were really focused in on the different types of trip purposes, like, you know, in the types of experiences that we see are most common. So there's this one spot that we have that I love, where it's a family reuniting for the first time. And I mean, it literally makes me tear up just almost even thinking about it, because there is that power in, again, people just recognizing how important it is to establish those emotional connections, and that it's only when you're in the presence, like in the same company of your loved ones, your colleagues, like other people, like that you kind of get that feeling of wholeness inside that you might not necessarily like experience like on a Zoom or Teams call or virtually. And so people have that, you know, newfound appreciation. And I think a lot of the locations and the scenarios were based off of what we're hearing our guests tell us. Like, my first trip is to go visit my mother or my grandchildren that I haven't seen in a year plus, or I want to get back on the road and have that chance to do an in-person meeting because I miss my colleagues and I can't wait to just give my best friend at work a hug again, that kind of thing. So I think a lot of it is just leaning into what we know is right now the real-time experiences, but also like what are the new and evolved expectations going in as well.
Yeah. So I work with marketers every day. More on the technical side, we are a company that sells a CDP, and we are getting a lot of brands coming to us trying to like talk about what post-pandemic life is going to be like. And there's like such a diverse message. So it's interesting to hear the creativity that you guys are coming out with, and then think about the technical side of things, like how do you send the right message to those people who are thinking about traveling overseas when some, you know, countries are still in lockdown mode? Or how do you, you know, find those people who are trying to get their families back together and get the right message over to them? So many opportunities to really take such a wonderful campaign and think about the strategy on how to engage those folks most. And it's something that, you know, if anyone in the audience ever had questions about how to do that, I'd be happy to. But I love such a diverse campaign. I've looked at some of the channels, and I've also played around with the app, and just it's beautiful to see all of the differences. And I'm trying to engage more with it to see how the messages might change up for me. I have not gone back to work. I will be going back to work soon, but I also have a very overdue trip to Europe with my family, and we're super excited about it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, like, right? I mean, I think if anything, people, like I said before, are just going to have this newfound appreciation. And I think that travel is something that it really does connect people and unify people. And I think we were talking before, right, as you were jumping on, that like there's this power in the planning. Like I know when I'm looking at different options and researching and kind of going through that whole experience of, okay, where do I go? Where do I stay? What activities do I want to do? Where do I want to eat? Who am I going with? Like whether it's with my immediate family, with like friends, like with coworkers, like it changes, but there's something like about the just like anticipation of it and then the actual experience. Like we know people have really high expectations right now because they haven't been traveling, right? So like there's a lot of pent up enthusiasm and demand and excitement just because that first trip you're like, I can't wait to not only get on the road but like get out of my house, and just expand my bubble a little bit more too. So
yeah, it's a good opportunity to make some new memories for sure.
Exactly.
So you touched on this a couple seconds ago, but the hospitality travel industry has really been impacted from an employee standpoint. You mentioned how much you guys focus on associate satisfaction because it leads to travelers and your members' satisfaction. Can you give us a little insight into how you're ensuring that the guest experience is supported by the associates as they come out from a kind of rough period?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that we can all say with confidence that like COVID has definitely impacted our present state of mind, our future experiences, and like people are coming at it from different perspectives. So we're very cognizant that for some people, it might be the first time, like you said, that they're going back into an office setting, that they're getting on the road, that they're interacting with colleagues like at our properties. And especially for our associates, like we want them to feel supported. And I think this whole idea of putting people first and making sure that like we're obviously having all of the different cleanliness protocols enforced, that they're up to date and informed in their trainings, and just we have daily meetings where we talk about and we reinforce like this could be somebody's first time in a hotel stepping foot for 16 months. Like they have pretty high expectations again, or they don't know, even if they've seen it in the grocery store or at the bank, like that plastic plexiglass might be a totally different experience like at a hotel versus like somewhere else. So we just kind of are trying to reinforce the messaging of like, again, we're open for business, we're here to welcome you when you're ready. We want people to feel comfortable, to feel like we're doing all the right things, because obviously again it's so important that like the cleanliness and standards are up to date and refined and evolved as needed. But then just in general, like whatever comfort level that our guests are giving us as cues, we will take that feedback. So some guests have said, we don't necessarily need like housekeeping to come in all the time as we once did. We'd prefer, to have less refresh or tidying or whatever it might be. Or we had a program. I was in a session this morning when we were talking about this. We've been doing a kind of on-demand room service, like an in-room dining program for several years. And that was just such a natural gateway when everything first started, because it was based off this insight that like people don't necessarily want somebody coming into their room. It's a little uncomfortable. It's a long formalized process. But if you can just like order on your app and then have somebody drop off something at your door, minimal interaction, and it's pretty efficient in terms of the speed, that's the best of all worlds. Like, if you're just looking for that sort of more privacy experience, or you don't want to have that limited, again, interaction. So that was something that we had been doing. I was working on this project almost 7 years ago, but we've been doing it. And that became like just such a great thing that we continued to execute over the past year or so, because a lot of our properties like have that in-room technology or ability to like use QR codes to scan, to order, pay for the services, add a tip, et cetera, and then have limited interactions and stuff too. So we're just trying to really meet people where they're at, whether it's the associate side or the guest side, but just ensure that like it works on all ends of the spectrum, and that at the end of the day, people feel comfortable and that they'll want to continue to travel and to come back again as well.
For sure. I mean, I'd consider myself a road warrior. Pre-pandemic, I was gone every week. This first trip does have caused me some hesitation, right? I'm going to be on Amtrak for the first time. I don't know what their protocols are. I feel a lot better about staying at one of your hotels in New York because of how you just explained it. But even how you described the old way of doing things would have, a representative from the hotel, push the little table into it. And there was that formality of it. And it was always a lovely experience, but you're right. I probably am not so sure that I'd want a person like that in my room right now. If I could just have a transaction like I've been having over the last couple of years or the last year with, you know, every DoorDash or Uber Eats or things like that. That is pretty cool. So you thought of it 7 years ago, but who would have ever thought about the pandemic being, you know, the perfect storm for all those things to come to fruition?
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally. It's really fascinating. I mean, you look at all of the different digital mechanisms, right? Like the in-app messaging or the contactless, like our keyless entry or check-in experiences. Like, I mean, so much of that has accelerated because of necessity, but it's also leaning into, from a convenience standpoint, evolved expectations wise too. Like these are going to become the things that stick around. Like I know I am excited that like some things just out of pure convenience, like are going to be here to stay because it's just a little bit easier. Like, you know, I think about going to one of your favorite restaurants. Yes, you want to have that dine-in experience, but if you're looking for takeout and they can bring it to your car or load up your trunk or something, that's like super convenient and it's just that much more seamless too.
for sure. I mean, there's been a ton of analysis on how life will be in the future, and a lot of it was proofed out by the pandemic and how people want to interact with brands in the future. So I think it's a great experience. It's nice that you guys are so far ahead. You know, I'm traveling for work. I have to, but you know, I'm not so sure that I'd be ready to take a trip to Europe. I can't right now for the places we want to go, but I'm going to have some hesitation with it. So can you talk to us a little bit about not the room cleanliness or those kind of cool things, but from a marketing standpoint, like how are you engaging people to come back into Marriott or consider Marriott above another brand? I mean, there's a lot of road to catch up on, and we'd love to hear about from a marketing standpoint, like what are you guys doing to engage past members and folks that are considering, you know, coming to Marriott for the first time?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just setting the expectations up front. So we do a lot in terms of the pre-arrival communications, knowing that sometimes depending on local restrictions or regulations, like there were periods where we weren't able to always have like all of our outlets open, for example, like the restaurants were limited in terms of the services that they can provide. Thankfully, at least domestically, like a lot of things are being evolved and opened and back up and everything. But you know, until there were local restrictions that were lifted, like it was impacting us. And so just having that transparency and communication so that our guests know, you know, if they're coming to our hotels, like, I mean, we just launched a great partnership with Uber Eats, right? So like that could be an option if for whatever reason, like something wasn't available on site, you know, just having that as a backup, for example. But I think in general, just the importance about like transparency of information. And I think what we've seen over and over again is that our guests, like, they're very willing to like, you know, offer up their opinion. Like they're wonderful at filling out our guest satisfaction surveys. They participate in online forums and communities and panels where they give feedback. And then also just like engaging with our team. Like we always encourage our associates to just obviously keep their eyes and ears open and do observations or like what are the common topics or things you're hearing about. But I think the big thing is we want to make sure that we're providing that transparent information so that we're setting the expectations from the get-go and then hopefully even elevating if not exceeding them. So when they come to the properties, it's like, you know, they have a baseline for what they know what will happen, but then if it's even better than they expected, like those are the surprise and delight moments. Those are the things that keep them talking or have them recommend to other people or share their experiences on social media. And so we're just always looking at kind of like what's the chatter out there. We're paying attention. I know when I used to go to a lot of our properties, like one of my favorite things to do would be just to talk to guests, you know, and I understand now like it's a little bit more limited, but I think, you know, just hearing directly from guests, like, what do you like? What do you not like? Is there something we could be doing better? Or, you know, we're so glad to hear that you've had a wonderful experience. Like, you know, would you mind sharing? Or if you do share, you know, please come back and visit us again. We'll look forward to seeing you the next time kind of thing. And I just think being really transparent and open and honest is key on both sides there too.
Yeah, I'd agree. It sounds like you guys did some regionalized messaging for the pandemic basis, different areas opened up. Do you think you'll continue that methodology?
I think too, and to a certain extent we have to, because of just like some of those local nuances, and given that things are kind of ever evolving and real time playing out. I think the big thing too is that we do want to stay consistent in our messaging. So of course, like having that holistic strategy piece, like thinking at a macro level is really important, and how it's either localized or experienced like at a regional level, I think is sort of determined by what's happening in the market and the conditions at the time. But I think like we know that like it's never going to be a one size fits all, and that there are going to have to be adaptations or adjustments that we make real time, given like certain things like, might be on our control, or if situations change, or if there are like things I'm thinking like, if strains evolve in the future, or if there are nuances that we have to kind of consider, we just have to be ready to on the fly adjust and adapt.
Yeah. A lot of our customers are asking us how to do that. Like, how do they communicate regionally? How do they communicate how they've interacted with the brand? We have some travel companies that are like, how do we market to people who are comfortable coming back, and we know that they were looking for a trip before the pandemic started, and how do we re-engage them? So there is a good deal and a good opportunity for brands like Marriott. It sounds like you're doing some of it today, and other people in the industry, to do hyper segmentation, to know more about the consumer and meet what their needs are digitally. And I think that's pretty neat that you guys are doing it, because there are a lot of people who want to start traveling but have some hesitation, or they just don't know. Like, I was actually getting my nails done the other day, and someone was talking to me about going to Paris this summer, and I said, oh, is France open? I said I was looking to book a trip to Madrid, and this very informed woman said, oh, Paris is open but Spain is not. And it's hard to like navigate, at least for me, and I consider myself pretty digitally savvy, like what the rules are right now. So it's great when a brand can communicate that with you. And I think it just makes it a better customer experience for sure, to have that kind of specificity in messaging.
Definitely. And as you said, like, I mean, as we're kind of all experiencing like what this will look like, and knowing that there are those differentiations and nuances, like it's real time that we're trying to just have it all play out. So yeah, I hope you do get to France, and I know you went into Madrid as well too.
Yeah. I'll go to any place right now. I'm ready to, I'll have to prepare. I have some hesitation, but I'm ready to get back on the road with my family. Switching a little bit to the future, you've talked about like the experience and being able to differentiate messages and have, right kind of, engagement with customers real time and digitally. But for a lot of companies, they've taken the time to figure out, what does the future look like for us? Like, are there opportunities to, I don't know, build additions? I'm on the board for YMCA, and while our gyms were shut down in Delaware, we painted all of them and we got new equipment in because we had some downtime. I'm sure Marriott's changes would be different than the YMCA, but are you guys thinking about anything differently for the future, like amenities or campaigns, or how you let a customer depart? Like, is there anything different happening?
I think so. I mean, I think again, as the buildings have been repurposed, like, I mean, we were one of the first companies to offer like on-site testing capabilities, especially as people are coming for like meetings and events, like our Connect with Confidence program. So we established like a program where people could join hybrid to meetings, or they could be in person, but just the ways, I mean, you think about like everything, the room setup, the food and beverage experience, the technology that was deployed, like all of that, I think was one thing. I think in general, just again, this idea of meeting people where they're at and feeling out various comfort levels, knowing that people might want to lean into something more than others. So we evolved like some of our food and beverage programming, where, for example, like we had like a couple of our hotels, they did like on-demand like happy hours, or like, beverage carts that would come room to room, or that would be in certain locations set up throughout the hotels and everything. So just again, knowing that people have different experiences and that they want different services or amenities in general. And I think, just in terms of like the market, like where we're going, like location wise, I can't even keep track. Like, I want to say we have over like 7,400 hotels at this point, maybe even 7,500. And, we're in so many different locations, but we did this great partnership with like the National Park Service last summer, because so many people were doing road trips or domestic and drive to markets and everything. And I think having the opportunity to like, get us in locations to have properties that are a little bit closer to some of these more desirable or interesting destinations, in addition to the like urban markets or the amazing resorts and stuff too. So I think just trying to like, again, pay attention to what is that new experience, or what are the preferences that are going to drive not only loyalty and return to visits, but word of mouth, endorsement, and just the, I think in general, like this new experience, or and what they're expecting it is going to be the future state too.
So I mentioned in the beginning, and I talked about how I'm a loyalist to your brand, but I don't think I looked at the app so much. So there's definitely some things I missed. If I wanted to find out what's going on in the future or what's happening right now, like where's the best place for me to find that information, specific maybe to my location or other programs that you guys are having, like the national parks and things like that?
I think, I mean, we do a great job. Our news team is constantly pushing out like great releases. You can sign up for alerts. And I mean, I think about some of the partnerships that we've done with not only like programs and partners, but also just in terms of like new development and locations, like properties that we're opening. I mean, there was some stat, this was about a year and a half ago. So sort of like right in early part of 2020, where we were opening like on average a new hotel like every 14 hours. I mean, it was just gangbusters in terms of the amount of new properties and everything. So I would say on our news channel site, like news.marriott.com is just the source where we have a lot of the releases. But then certainly on the app, like where you have some of those push notifications and messages that go through as well. And I think in general, like, you know, all of our channels, like all of our proprietary channels, we have great resources that are constantly tracking and monitoring, like from a social engagement standpoint. And then at the local level, at the property level, like a lot of our properties obviously have their own handles or accounts and feeds where they're responding real time. And they're trying to have those moments where, like, I hear stories of people that go to our hotels that post an Instagram photo, and then, you know, they've tagged the hotel, and maybe like a couple hours later they go back to their room and there's a framed print of that Instagram photo, like and those are the kinds of things, like, I mean, the associates get so creative with the thoughtful gestures. And just in general, like I think that personalization and leaning into like this idea that people feel like acknowledged, appreciated, recognized, like we're trying to just make sure that, you know, knowing the stakes are high, right? We want to try to deliver however we can too.
Yeah, that's a very savvy social media team too.
Yes, they're very.
That's pretty impressive. I've
not
heard
everywhere, but I've seen it. I've heard of it, and it's impressive when it's executed well. So yeah, definitely.
No, I would agree. As a Bonvoy member, are there any kind of like, all the things that you're talking about are so cool. Like, how do people get involved in like the beta programs to hear about this stuff and maybe be front runners with their friends and fellow travelers?
So I'd say the big thing is, you know, definitely try to work on your status in terms of getting those different levels and tiers. And we've actually,
you guys kept mine from
yes,
prior, so I love that. And I think I stayed somewhere and you guys gave me 6 rooms for 1 or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's continuing, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Definitely. No, thank you. Again, this is why, like, I mean, candidly, before I even joined the industry, I had no idea. And now I have a newfound appreciation as to why loyalty is that much more impactful and important. Because, you know, when you stick to a brand and you're loyal to a program, like you not only obviously get those perks and privileges, but you get like that recognition that I think is like obviously so important, but also like you said, you're working hard, you're the road warrior, you want to treat your family to this wonderful experience. And like, it's a way to like, you know, just validate and make sure that like, you know, going forward, it's something that you'll continue to appreciate. But so I'd say people like, you know, we're always looking to our members for feedback. Like there is the Marriott Bonvoy Insiders community that's on our Facebook group. You can join that, where I think that's really, I'm always fascinated to hear some of the conversations. Like people will throw out there, I'm going to X destination, which brands of these 5 hotels that are there should I stay at? Give me the benefits, the trade-offs. And it's like their own little mini focus group that they'll do among members. We have panels. We have like, you know, obviously we always encourage people to give back feedback in our guest satisfaction surveys. So typically we don't spam you. You'll get maybe asked only once or twice a year, like after your stays and stuff, but we do read every single survey, and the hotels try to respond if there's any concern, but obviously if there's praise, we want to acknowledge that too. And I know for a long time here at headquarters, we had a scrolling roll of every single comment that was coming in, because it was just so important to keep it visible and top of mind to everybody. Like, this is real time what's happening. Like, we want to make sure that we're engaged to the voice of the customer, what they're telling us, what's important from the guest experience side. So I promise you, those are the best feedback loop mechanisms we can ask for, just in terms of staying up to date, but also like we take those very seriously, and we want to try to respond accordingly too.
Yeah, I love it when I will frequently use Twitter, true confession, as my way into customer service anywhere. And travel brands have specifically done a very good job with responding right away. But I can only imagine, it sounds like you guys had a command center of good and bad and ugly, and you probably had lots of reps taking care of that feedback and addressing those. So that's pretty neat to know that you guys take that so seriously.
Yeah, it's amazing. I will just give a plug. We have this thing called My Live, which is like exactly like you described. It's a command center, and real time they monitor all the chatter, all the different conversation. And I think it's just so powerful, because like we can not only thematically kind of understand what's the sentiment out there, what's being talked about, but it's a way for us to address those issues. So like, as you said, if you were calling out on a handle, or if there was something that came up, like hopefully it resolved before it becomes a bigger issue, or vice versa. If it's something that we had, it was a couple of years ago now when this whole command center was created, they just did some amazing activations where I remember it was when we had like one of our loyalty members check in, and I can't recall what number he was, but he was like some monumental, like maybe like the 10 millionth member to use mobile check-in or some significant milestone. And so when he checked into the hotel, like it was like, this whole celebration that took place, like, and he was there and it was at the JW Marriott at LA Live, and which is right next to the Ritz-Carlton there. And he came and he checked in with his wife, and they acknowledged, and then they did like a flash mob, and they had like all these like balloons and streamers and everything. And it was just such a viral moment. It was very powerful. But those are the kinds of things that I think, like, had we not, like, I believe that the reason why we identified and tagged him was because he had posted something like, "Hey, I'm celebrating my anniversary. What should I do while I'm here?" or something. So it was a couple weeks in planning in terms of the process, but it was so amazing that we could execute that too.
That's why I love data. I get nerdy about it. But I kept thinking when you're describing that, I'm like, well, what if he was an introvert and it just wasn't that great of an experience? So when you explain how you figured out that he was an extrovert, that probably was honestly a great experience for him. And it's a lot of fun for sure.
Totally.
That's interesting. We're at a little after 1:10. Are there any questions that the audience has for us? Let's see here. We have one QA. Okay, so this is from the audience, and the question is I've seen Marriott start to offer up villas and homes. Can you tell us a little bit about the strategy behind that? I'm guessing to compete with Airbnb, but what is Marriott's future vision for it?
Yes. So I'm glad that this question was brought up. So Homes and Villas is one of our newest brands. So exactly that. It's like a housing rental service. I think a lot of people actually don't even probably know about it, but it's kind of comparable to like, some of the traditional competitors out there. But we have obviously like our own standards and protocols as it relates to what we will select as properties that can qualify for these homes and villas, as well as just in general, like some of the perks and privileges, like with getting points, redeeming points, like all of that is tied to it. So I believe I'd have to double check the figures, but like we are going global. Like we started off in Europe and the US, but then there are plans to expand to other markets, and we have all sorts of different properties. I mean, you have the traditional, like, I know that there are some big beach houses in like the south of the United States. So like in markets like Savannah and Florida, we have apartment rentals that are in like places like Europe. We have Tuscan villas like in Italy. I mean, there are some really interesting and fascinating locations. But what we love about it is we know people want flexibility when it comes to their travel plans. So somebody might be wanting to have more of that homestay experience, and this leans into that. And it just gives the opportunity for families to travel, for groups of friends to be together, that kind of thing. And I think the Homes and Villas is just it's growing like gangbusters. The team is doing an incredible job with just the distribution and the presence globally.
I did check it out. And there are some lovely small homes that are cozy, but I did see some of those monster big ones, and it looks like that would be great for big family trips.
Totally. And I just saw, May, who's a colleague of mine, who's on the Homes and Villas team, she just posted into the chat that we have 30,000 homes in 250 global destinations. So that's pretty amazing when you hear those figures.
Oh, that's a lot. I'm going to really have to check that out further. So that was the only question we got. Are there any other questions that people have? Okay. Well, I have one last question for you. It's not about Marriott.
Okay.
But, probably a pretty wide known fact for people that know me well, but for this audience, no one would know this. I am a huge basketball fan, college basketball. And we have also several people inside of my organization that are Duke alums, as you are. So Coach K has announced his retirement. I think everyone is sighing. What do you think is going to happen? How do you feel about it? You hearing any insider scoop?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that. So I was so fortunate. I loved going to Duke for my MBA. And when I was there in 2010, it was the first year since I've graduated. They won again in 2015, but they won the national championship. And John Shire, who's now going to be the new coach, he was a senior that year. So while I was in grad school and a couple of years older, he was the one and was one of the co-captains on the team and leading, and now is going to be the new coach. I think it definitely, at least for me, it took me a little bit by surprise because especially with our rival UNC, and I have two younger brothers, and one of my brothers went to UNC for law school. So we have that kind of intra-family rivalry and everything with Tobacco Road there. Roy Williams had just announced that he was planning to retire too. So it was sort of like, oh my gosh, and now Coach K, what's happening? But what I love is that the day after the announcement happened with Coach K, and that it was kind of indicative that John Shire was going to become the new coach, and knowing that they looked external and that they were considering other candidates, but they really wanted somebody who had grown up with the program and has been on the team and everything for a while now. I think they posted like one of those like Throwback Thursday or Flashback Friday photos where it was John and Coach K like side by side, and John was probably like 14, 12 years old. I mean, pretty young. And it was like dream big. And I just thought that was so cool that there was like that changing of the guard and the handing over of the, program and everything. And I know people are going to like, he's left such an incredible legacy. I mean, Coach K, we have this Coach K Center for Ethics and Leadership and Ethics at the business school. And he's been a guest speaker and lecturer, and he just does an amazing job. But I think that people are really, really excited about thinking of the future of like the program. And like you said, college basketball, I think is just one of the most intense like rivalries throughout sports. And I get very into March Madness. So
me too. Maybe I'll invite
we'll do brackets. Yeah. I was going to say, well, we'll do some brackets the next time against each other or something, but it's just, I think that there's a lot of high hopes, but also just in general, like, people are feeling good about John and about Coach K going forward too.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. We're definitely going to keep our eyes out for it. And I'm wondering if I can get a ticket. I do think that they'll be very expensive this year, but I'm going to try.
That would be great. Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you guys so much. I don't follow the college basketball so much, so I can't comment on that. But what a great session. Thank you so much. I think what was a really great reminder was how important it is for everyone on your team at Marriott to really embrace their role in driving the guest experience, and ensuring it's amazing. With all of us getting excited to travel again, I know I am, you really got to make sure that you guys deliver when we arrive, excited to hear about things going more digital and, mobile, make consumers feel comfortable about just kind of that experience with you, especially after everything we've gone through in the last year. And I do have one last question. Are you still doing the on-demand happy hours with the drinks delivered to your rooms? Because I'm going to be in Dallas staying at one of your properties next week, and I might need to tap into that. Or is that the lobby bars are open now, so not anymore?
They are. Yeah, most of our hotels are operating back at full capacity, and I think having the kind of pre-pandemic experiences. I honestly think it varies by property. So I'd say check in. Hopefully some of the pre-arrival communications will, lean into that and give you kind of what you need to know before you get there. But I think it's something. I'm in a afternoon session related to this food and beverage strategy too, so I'll bring it up there as well.
It seems like a really cool thing when you're just working away in your hotel room, especially with business travel, to just have somebody knock on my door with some, happy hour beverages. That would be fun. So thank you both for sharing the insights. And, as a loyal Bonvoy member myself, I'm so happy to hear about the vision in the future and your commitment to listening to your members. That's really great. I'm never one who lacks on providing feedback. So that's good to hear as well. So really appreciate both your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay, up next, our next session, we're going to hear insights and thoughts from David Knapp, Director Customer Site